All right, picture this. You're strolling through a bustling market in Nairobi, maybe grabbing a coffee, and you pull out your phone. You tap, you swipe, you make a call. But what if every single one of those digital whispers, every byte of data, every conversation was being routed through servers built and maintained by a company thousands of miles away in China? Now, zoom out a bit. Imagine a massive 5,000-ton coal train rumbling out of a brand new Chinese-financed mine in Botswana. Its cargo bound for a deep-water port that China helped redesign, or maybe even outright built. These aren't hypotheticals, folks. This is happening right now. And Washington? Well, Washington just issued a pretty stark warning. These two seemingly disparate facts could fundamentally shift the global balance of power before this decade is even out. Intrigued? Ready to peel back the layers and really see why this matters? Because it's a lot bigger than just infrastructure. Let's be honest, Africa needs everything. We're talking roads, railways, ports, reliable power grids, and a robust digital backbone. The World Bank estimates the continent needs to spend an eye-watering $130 billion each year just to keep pace with its rapidly growing population and burgeoning economies. For decades, traditional Western donors have played a familiar tune. They've promised, they've stalled, they've re-promised, and then, more often than not, they've just disappeared. Their aid often came with a tangled web of conditionalities, bureaucratic red tape, and a pace that simply couldn't match Africa's urgent needs. Then enter China, stage left, with a completely different playbook. Their state banks can write billion-dollar checks in weeks, not years, cutting through the usual bureaucratic molasses. They arrive with a no-strings-attached rhetoric, or at least that's what they say up front. But the reality is a bit more complex, isn't it? Every cable, every camera, every steel beam that China brings to the table comes with its own set of invisible strings, threads that reach all the way back to Beijing, weaving a complex tapestry of influence and dependency. It's a pragmatic, often swift, and undeniably effective approach that has reshaped the continent's development landscape, much to the chagrin of Western powers. Let's start with those cameras we talked about. Back in 2014, Nairobi, Kenya, became a pioneering city in Africa, signing up for Huawei's ambitious Safe City package. We're not talking about a few security cameras here and there. This was a comprehensive system involving 2,000 high-definition cameras, a national data center to crunch all that information, and sophisticated facial recognition software capable of picking a single face out of a crowd of 50,000. Now, to be fair, the murder rate in Nairobi did drop. That's a tangible, positive outcome. According to figures promoted by Huawei, crime in areas covered by the project fell 46% in the first year. But here's the kicker. So did the margin for political dissent. When every public space is under constant digital scrutiny, when your face can be identified and tracked, the space for protest, for critical voices, inevitably shrinks. And it didn't stop there. Uganda's version of this system, for instance, can reportedly text police if a person of interest walks into view of any camera. Think about that for a second. By 2025, this same model, or variations of it, had landed in at least 22 African countries. This isn't just about security, it's about control. Chinese tech firms now maintain a staggering 70% of Africa's 4G backbone. That's not just a technical statistic, it's a profound strategic reality. Translation? The very same fiber optic cables that stream your favorite Netflix clips, that connect families across continents, that enable burgeoning e-commerce platforms are also humming with data back to servers that Washington fears could be tapped on demand. This isn't just a commercial venture. It's part of China's broader Digital Silk Road initiative, a global strategy to export its technological influence. Critics are even starting to use terms like digital colonialism, arguing that by embedding Chinese digital infrastructure and surveillance technology so deeply, Africa is becoming reliant on a system that could be used for authoritarian purposes. African governments, often desperate for affordable infrastructure, frequently adopt these technologies thanks to highly subsidized loans from Chinese banks. It's a compelling offer: cheap tech, fast deployment, and seemingly no questions asked. But the long-term implications for privacy, data protection, and democratic freedoms are a serious concern, especially in countries with weak legal frameworks. The US worries that this isn't just about selling hardware. It's about exporting a model of digital governance that fundamentally differs from Western ideals. Now, let's shift from the digital superhighway to good old-fashioned steel rails. Take the Tanzania-Zambia Railway, or TAZARA. For example, built by China way back in the 1970s, it was once a symbol of South-South cooperation. But by recent years, it was practically limping along, trains barely chugging at 20 kilometers an hour. A vital artery for landlocked Zambia's copper exports, it was on the verge of collapse. Beijing, ever the pragmatist, stepped in. They just pledged a whopping $1.4 billion to rebuild the line, add new, modern locomotives, and crucially, link it to a brand new, deep-water port at Bagamoyo on Tanzania's coast. Here's where the strings become visible. The deal gives China's state rail operator a 30-year concession. Think about what that means. For the next 3 decades, Zambian copper, a critical global commodity, will travel on Chinese-tracked, Chinese-insured, Chinese-managed infrastructure, all the way to the Indian Ocean. It's not just a railway. It's an economic corridor entirely under Chinese operational control. Washington's fear? It's simple, really. If you control the tracks, you control the royalties, you control the timetable, and perhaps most ominously, if geopolitical tensions spike, you control the off switch. This isn't just about efficient trade, it's about strategic leverage, and TAZARA is just one example. China is heavily involved in revitalizing and expanding critical transport infrastructure across the continent. There's the Hunan-Guangdong Africa Sea Rail Intermodal Train Service, which has massively boosted logistics and trade efficiency. They're building new airports, like in Liberia and Libya, and signing maritime transport agreements that further integrate African trade routes into China's global network. These projects aren't just about moving goods. They're about shaping economic dependencies and ensuring access to vital resources. Let's talk power. In the first half of 2025 alone, China pumped an astonishing $39 billion into African energy projects. That's more than it spent on its entire Belt and Road Initiative globally in 2022. This isn't a trickle, it's a flood. We're seeing massive wind farms sprouting up in Egypt, sprawling solar parks powering Ethiopia, and yes, you heard that right, ultra-supercritical coal plants being built in Zimbabwe. American diplomats, understandably, call this a glaring climate contradiction. On one hand, China champions renewable energy. On the other, it's financing some of the most polluting forms of power generation on the planet. Beijing, however, sees it differently. They call it dispatchable power, reliable, always-on electricity for the factories and industries that will ultimately pay back those hefty loans. Either way you slice it, the host governments get desperately needed electricity today. But they also inherit a significant carbon bill tomorrow, one that the planet can ill afford. Meanwhile, Chinese construction giants are booking profit margins that Washington, with its often more stringent environmental and labor regulations, simply can't match. It's a pragmatic, if environmentally problematic, solution to Africa's energy deficit. And it further entrenches Chinese influence in a critical sector. This investment isn't just about immediate energy needs. It's about long-term resource security and market access for Chinese industries. They're involved in everything from oil and gas, helping restore production infrastructure in South Sudan, for instance, to cutting-edge nuclear energy cooperation in countries like Kenya and Ghana. It's a comprehensive approach to powering Africa's growth, and in doing so, powering China's strategic objectives. Now, let's dig a little deeper. Literally, head over to the Cobalt Belt of the Southern Democratic Republic of Congo, a region of immense strategic importance. Here, China has executed what can only be described as a masterstroke of resource diplomacy. They've swapped roads, hospitals, and even 2 brand new airports for mineral rights worth an estimated $50 billion. This isn't just a simple transaction, it's a full-spectrum integration. Trucks, often Chinese-made, haul cobalt and copper straight to Chinese-built railheads, which then connect to Chinese-run ports. And finally, these vital raw materials are shipped to Chinese refineries. Desperate need. Why does this matter so much? Because the United States needs that cobalt. It's a non-negotiable component for practically every fighter jet engine, every electric vehicle battery, and every iPhone battery it hopes to field. In short, it's critical for America's technological future and its national security. The problem? Washington has virtually zero control over a supply chain that it suddenly depends on for its very economic and military competitiveness. This infrastructure for resources model has given China unparalleled access and control over some of the world's most critical minerals, creating a strategic vulnerability for the West that is becoming increasingly difficult to mitigate. Beyond cobalt, Chinese firms are securing mining rights for lithium-ion battery material production in Morocco, establishing steel plants in Algeria, and investing in a wide array of other mineral resources. This isn't just about individual mines. It's about securing the raw materials that fuel the global economy and, increasingly, the technologies of the future. China is systematically positioning itself at the very source of these critical supply chains, giving it immense leverage. The debt trap debate. It's a contentious one, isn't it? Critics, particularly in the West, are quick to shout, "Debt trap," at every opportunity, warning of African nations falling prey to predatory lending. Defenders, often pointing to Africa's desperate need for development, shout back, "They're just desperate for development, and China is delivering." The truth, as is often the case, probably sits somewhere in the messy middle. China's loans are often concessional, meaning they come with relatively favorable terms. Think 2% interest rates and 20-year grace periods. That certainly sounds attractive when you're a developing nation struggling to secure financing. But here's the crucial detail. These loans are almost always collateralized, and not just by future revenues, but often by commodity exports or, most strategically, by port revenues. If a country, say Zambia, misses a payment, China can and did take over strategic assets. Remember that television spectrum? Zambia missed a payment, and China stepped in to manage it until the arrears were settled. Washington's takeaway from these incidents is chillingly clear. Strategic assets, vital for a nation's economy and even its sovereignty, can quietly change hands without a single aircraft carrier needing to be deployed. It's a form of economic coercion, or at least leverage, that operates beneath the radar of traditional military power. While China vehemently denies the debt trap narrative, arguing that its loans are simply commercial agreements, the outcomes often leave African nations with less control over their own strategic infrastructure and resources. It creates a complex web of financial and political obligations that can shift geopolitical alignments without a shot being fired. Now, let's not paint African negotiators as passive victims in all this. That would be a disservice to their growing sophistication and strategic acumen. Far from it. Many African governments are incredibly shrewd. They've learned to play this high-stakes game. Take Kenya, for example. When Huawei came knocking with its digital infrastructure, Kenya didn't just roll over. They forced Huawei to store all local data within Kenya's borders and insisted that Kenyan firms be paid for maintenance. That's a significant win for local control and economic benefit. Ghana, another example, required that any nuclear reactors built on its soil adhere to International Atomic Energy Agency (IAEA) safeguards, not just Chinese standards, demonstrating a clear commitment to international best practices and safety. The smartest governments, the ones with their eyes on long-term sovereignty and national interest, are learning to play Beijing off Washington, off Brussels, and even off New Delhi. They're creating an auction, if you will, for investment and influence, squeezing out better terms, better deals, and more favorable conditions for their own people. And this dynamic, this growing African leverage, is something the United States absolutely hates. Why? Because every round of this auction raises the price of influence that Washington once took for granted, believing its historical ties and democratic ideals would always hold sway. Now, they have to compete, and often compete on terms that China has already set: speed, scale, and a less conditional approach to finance them. It's a new geopolitical reality where African nations are increasingly asserting their agency. So what's Washington's answer to all this? So far, it's felt a bit scrambled, to be honest. We've seen a lot of warnings, a fair share of sanctions on Chinese tech firms, which, while impactful, often feel like playing whack-a-mole. And then there's the financial response. The U.S. has trumpeted initiatives like its $7 billion infrastructure fund. Sounds substantial, right? But spread that across 54 diverse countries, each with monumental infrastructure needs. And it quickly looks more like a rounding error than a game changer. It's a drop in the ocean compared to the scale of Chinese investment. The U.S. International Development Finance Corporation, DFC, can offer single-digit interest rates, which is competitive. But here's the rub. Congress still caps individual projects at a relatively paltry $60 million. Now, compare that to a single Chinese coal plant in Zimbabwe, a project that can cost over $1 billion. Approved and breaking ground in a short time frame. The disparity in scale, speed, and bureaucratic agility is stark, almost embarrassing. The U.S. system, designed with checks and balances, transparency, and a multitude of stakeholders, struggles to compete with China's top-down, state-directed model. It's like trying to win a sprint against a bullet train while wearing lead boots. The intent might be there, but the operational capacity and political will to match China's speed and scale often seem to be lacking. This isn't just about money. It's about a fundamental difference in how these two global powers approach development and influence. Okay, so why should you care about fiber optics in Nairobi or a railway in Tanzania? Let's bring it home. If you pay taxes in the United States, you're currently underwriting a race, a geopolitical, economic, and technological race for the global supply chains that will ultimately decide whether the next decade of cutting-edge tech, from AI to electric vehicles, is assembled in Shenzhen or Seattle. Your tax dollars are indirectly funding a competition for influence, for resources, and for the future of global commerce. But even if you live anywhere else on this planet, the stakes are incredibly high. Think about it. The privacy settings on your phone, the eventual price of your next electric vehicle battery, and even the carbon count in the air we all breathe. All of these things hinge, in part, on who wins this bidding war for Africa's future. Who controls the data? Who controls the critical minerals? Who dictates the terms of development? These aren't abstract questions. They have direct, tangible impacts on your daily life, your economy, and the future of the planet. Africa isn't just a continent. It's the next great battleground for global power, and its trajectory will shape everyone's future. If this story felt bigger than just one continent, if it resonated with the complex, interconnected world we live in, then do yourself a favor. Hit that subscribe button. We unpack global power plays, economic shifts, and technological frontiers every single week. And hey, drop a comment below. What do you think? Is China a genuine partner for Africa? Or are we witnessing a new form of colonial power taking root? And please, share this with that friend who still thinks foreign aid is just charity. Because these days, especially in Africa, it's high-stakes economics with profound implications for everyone. Ultimately, China isn't just laying fiber and pouring concrete across Africa. It's exporting a comprehensive model where infrastructure isn't merely about development. It's explicitly about influence. It's a strategic long game. The United States, meanwhile, isn't just losing out on construction contracts. It's ceding control over the very arteries of tomorrow's economy, the digital networks, the transport corridors, and the critical resource supply chains. And Africa? Africa, caught in the middle, is doing what any astute region would do when two giants arrive on its doorstep. It's taking the best offer today, leveraging its position for immediate gains, all while keeping one wary eye firmly fixed on the exit, mindful of the historical echoes of external powers dictating its destiny. The real question, the one that will define the coming decades, is no longer who built the rail line or who financed the data center. That's just the visible tip of the iceberg. The profound, lingering question, the one that will shape the global order, is this: who ultimately gets to write the rules once all that concrete dries and the digital networks are fully humming?